We mentioned before that the Nets weren't the only team to change dramatically yesterday. It seems like every team changed. I mean, if you're a fan base that your team didn't change at all, like the Portlands, OKC, there's a couple out there that just didn't make Cleveland. I was trying to think of the good teams that didn't do anything, and then there were some bad ones that didn't. I'm just going to give a very quick Cliff's Notes rundown of where the moves in the East from yesterday, and then get your opinion on where you think the Nets, with this season's version of the Nets that we talked about with that starting lineup we mentioned of Irving, Karras, Harris, Turian, and then Jared Allen / DeAndre Jordan, where you think they land. So let's go. The Bucks lose Malcolm Brogdon. They sign Middleton. They sign Robin Lopez and Brooke Lopez. That the Robin one doesn't really matter. I'm going to call them a tick worse. Brogdon is kind of a big loss for them. Philly, they lose Butler, but they bring back Josh Richardson in his place, and Al Horford, even bigger. So that team is that was the team I was just had so many thoughts about. I'm going to call them better, if nothing worse than they're the same. Toronto is a question mark without Kawhi. Don't know yet. I'm going to say Indiana probably better. They brought in T.J. Warren and Brogdon as well, and they lost Bojan Bogdanovic. Celtics probably worse, but did sign Kemba, but lost Horford. Bulls, I guess, are slightly better with some of the moves they made. Magic are generally the same. Pistons are generally the same. Hornets are way worse. Might be the worst team in basketball. Signed maybe arguably the worst contract was Terry Rozier to multiple years yesterday. Heat are weird, but they get Jimmy Butler. The Wizards are going to be worse, I think. Cavs are going to be terrible. And the Knicks are probably going to be pretty bad as well. So that's my very quick version of the
concise
of where the East kind of stands here. Where do you see this version of the Nets fitting in with that group, knowing there are still some other moves to be made? Like I said, Kawhi, the Butler deal is not finalized yet. Some of these teams probably have a move or two. There are a couple free agents left out there, DeMarcus Cousins being one of them. But where do you see the Nets sort of landing in that group, and what are your realistic expectations for this group, knowing that, again, the big free agent signing that they made is going to appear essentially a season from now?
Yeah, so and you pointed it out. Toronto, what happens there with Kawhi is obviously a big factor in terms of who is considered the top team in the East. As of right now, I'd probably look at the Philadelphia 76ers and say, man, they got bigger, which that being potentially the thing that the Nets struggled with last year and could this upcoming season. So the Sixers could be
real quick on that.
Yeah,
they're bigger is not even a good term for it. They're massive. Their smallest guy is 6'6", Josh Richardson. That's their smallest guy. Everyone else is 6'9" or above, and two of those guys can defend multiple positions in Simmons and Harris. This team is a size and skilled like we haven't really seen before. This harkens back to the 80s of basketball, where you just went huge across the board. I don't think. Yeah, so I wanted to. You said big. I wanted to make sure we just are aware. This team is not just big; they are ginormous, to use.
And they're projecting for say Embiid at center, Horford at power forward, and then Harris playing at the forward position. So you're talking about moving Harris, who was flexing to the power forward, and he still will, but all of a sudden him at his size is actually moving down a position in terms of putting his height to use. So yeah, they are massive is a much better term. So as far as the Nets go though, I think that with the moves they made, Kyrie is taking out Russell, bringing in Kyrie. You've also added in DeAndre Jordan, so it gives you a little more physicality and adds size to your team, which is a big help. I assume that depending on what Toronto does, I'm looking at them. Bucks are going to be up there. Philly is obviously up there. Then you start to get into that, depending on Toronto, that's the third, three top teams there. I look at the Nets as being the team that should be in that 4 or 5 seed kind of range as you head into this season. So when you talk about long-term prospects for the season, even without Durant, and we've talked about this, I know that I tell other Nets fans to temper expectations and understand that it is about the following season with Durant. That being said, I think I still want to see progress from last season to this upcoming season. So for me, this can't be a 42-win team again. I do want to see the increase in wins based even solely on having Kyrie on this roster. I also would like to see them get themselves into a better position when it comes to seeding in the playoffs. So do I think that Kyrie this year and DeAndre Jordan, the rest of the roster as it stands, I think that they should be a 4 or 5 seed. And ideally, I would love to see them get a home court advantage in the first round and have an opportunity to win a first round playoff series. That to me would be a really nice, quote unquote modest step forward. I know that last year was a little bit of a surprise in terms of what they were able to accomplish, but I think winning a playoff series really sends a message of look where we're at right now, and then we add KD into this fold. And this is the guy that puts us over the top and pushes us to that conference final competition in the following season. So for me personally, that's where I sit. It can't be that you go into this season and say, it's okay, Durant comes next year. Because then I would look at it and say, then why do we have Kyrie Irving? Kyrie Irving's supposed to move the needle for this team. He's supposed to make the players around him better. He's supposed to be the late game closer, on the ball, making those big plays for you. So I would, 6 games better in the win-loss column. So I want to see them up to maybe 48, pushing towards 50 wins probably. And I want to see them, like I said, battling for a 4 seed, battling for home court advantage, and first round playoff win. And the way you broke down the East, as bad as a lot of these teams are, some of them are going to make the playoffs. So the lower seeds there should be an easy win there if you can get yourself in the top half of the seeding come playoff time. Does that seem, and I'd love to, as the more analytical at this point out of the two of us, does that line up with you? Do you think that that's reasonable expectations, or are you kind of in the boat of, it's okay, this season can be a bit of a wash?
Well, I was feeling good about it, and then you sent me something that Kyrie Jesus, sound like an old guy, that he posted on that he posted on Instagram, and it was like the eye of providence with some weird quote thing about it, about like seeing how all the pieces matter, and I was like, oh boy,
yeah.
This is a whole.
Only I, EYE, know what's right for me. I'm sorry, I sent that to you as being as insightful. I think you read that completely wrong.
I think I responded, "Good Lord!"
Yes.
I was like, "Oh God, I got a whole season of this, 4 years of this." I think that your expectation there is probably the very best case scenario, if I'm being realistic. This team is still flawed. There's no way you cannot be flawed again when you have a max player that's not playing. There's no way around it. Like I just don't have another way to phrase it really. So I think that. And I honestly think you're going to see the Nets play it this way, because what you're not going to see is you're not going to see them make any moves at the deadline, right? Almost no matter which way the season is going. It'd be insane to make moves off their young core at this deadline this year, right, because not knowing like what they're going to have with Durant coming back. So I don't think you're going to see any moves. I think come January, I think you're going to kind of know what we have with this team. And my guess is that something like you said. I think if I'm being very realistic, I think it's something like a 4, probably 5, maybe a 6 seed. And that's not bad. And I know that's not going to represent progress.
Well, so let me jump in real quick, though. If you say 6 seed, give me the 5 teams that are ahead of them.
Well, let's say the Raptors. Let's say Kawhi stays.
Right.
Bucks, Raptors, Sixers. I'm going to say one of the 2 of Pacers or Celtics are going to be in line with them, if not like make a small step forward. And then I'm gonna throw in those. I'll just say those. Those are the teams. I think the Bucks are still have the best player in the East, if arguably. And then Kawhi, Kawhi's the best player. Then Giannis is second best. It's semantics, or it's pulling.
Right, but basically we're talking Pacers, Celtics, and Nets as being the 3 teams, 4 through 6, and that's gonna be the real. Most likely, as you said, assuming Kawhi, that's going to be the interesting area of seeding as you go through.
Right, exactly. I'm not confident saying that like they're better than either of those teams. I think they're on par with those teams. Not going forward, I'd like their chances better going forward. I'm just saying for this season, the Pacers, I mean, they have their own problems too. Like Oladipo's coming, has a ruptured quad. That's a devastating injury as well. So maybe I'm being too bearish. I don't know. This is not a top 3. This is not a top 3 seed in the East unless Kawhi is not there, and even then it's pushing it. So I'm gonna set something like 43, 44 wins, conservatively, and I'm happy to be wrong about that. And if they push up, their 4 or 5 wins this season into that 47 range, I think that's a massive win. But maybe I'm being too bearish. I don't know. I'd be happy to have it go the other way. All right, we're gonna go a little long. I think we might end up podcasting later in this week or next week. It does feel like there's just tons to talk about. There is still open stuff. Do you want to go Knicks fans real quick for to end things off here? Do you want to talk about where the bench? What's more interesting to you, Nets bench right now or Knicks fans and their collective reactions to yesterday's news?
More interesting is the Nets bench. More entertaining is the Knicks fans. So we're gonna go. Let's go Knicks on this one. And you and I were talking. We have a mutual friend. We'll give him the shout out. Depressed Knicks fan Andy, who was texting with me as well yesterday, and he was mostly just like, "Hey man, how excited are you as a Nets fan to be seeing these moves get made?" And then he was just kind of like, "Let me just also add in that I'm thinking about killing myself." And it's just. You know, and we talked about this on other podcasts where we were saying, you know, I would be pretty upset if we're talking about signing Julius Randle to the Nets, and then of course you hear that the Knicks are going to sign him, and then you know, was it Taj Gibson on a 2-year $20 million? I mean, you know, it's just funny because if you're Jim Dolan and you come out, you know, you go on radio shows and you're like, guess what? We're getting them. You know, 2 big guys, they're coming in. When all of a sudden you turn around and go, we're going to build for the future. It doesn't mean that building for the future and building through the draft is a bad move, but it's just it's like standard Knicks. And even when you're starting to do the right thing, it just feels like, my God, guys, like, couldn't you just have not said the first thing and then had people be like, well, look at the Knicks. They're taking the right approach. You know, I don't know. Well, insert your joke here, you know?
The Julius Randle, the Woj Julius Randle thing was like almost a scheduled tweet, I thought. Like he just locked and loaded that bad boy in Hootsuite like a week ago, and he was like, "I'll just fill in the numbers later. He's definitely gonna happen. I'll just fill in what the actual contract terms are later." That guy's like the most Knicks guy that's like, it's not even I gotta be honest, it's not even a terrible contract for him, all things considered, where the Knicks were left. They did end up signing Bobby Portis as well. The Taj Gibson thing made no sense to me considering they have Mitchell Robinson. Now it's just gonna be a bunch of sort of interior. Randall did shoot some threes, but it's mostly interior guys. It's mostly just the collective shoulder slump, like insert Michael Cera from Arrested Development walking through the desert with his shoulders down gif, the Charlie Brown move through the thing, because it really was one, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, having been now fully introduced to Nets Twitter, the Nets Twitter is buoyed as much by Knicks fans' demise as they are by their own team getting good, which is like your classic, like my buddy James was saying, your classic. It was the classic Mets thing too, Mets Yankees kind of thing. It's like these contracts. These teams are almost powered by their hatred of the other and how they feel about the other one. So I think Nets fans seeing Knicks fans just strike out on all these exact guys, and the Knicks fans' reaction of like, oh, we're still the Knicks and we still have the Garden. You're like, I don't know. What else do you have? You got Bobby Portis for a couple of years. Have fun with that. You know, like
I'll say too. Like, and I will say too. Like, just objectively, as a Knicks fan, you know, you miss on all this stuff. So like, just try to be optimistic that you drafted some young players, and maybe you are finally going to try to build things the proper way. Like maybe you're just going to watch what Brooklyn did the last few years and be like, oh, maybe that's what we should have done, you know, 15 years ago. But you know, so that's the silver lining of it. What I will say though is, I got, and you said Twitter was blowing up. I'm on Instagram a bit. The reaction that I got following the KD signing from a Knicks fan, his line was, "Man, you're so lucky." Like it was just, even as the Knicks fans' ability to still be somehow like puffing their chest out in some weird way of like, "Hey, you signed that broken KD." You know, thankfully our owner was smart enough not to take a risk on a guy like that. Like there's still a weird dynamic about Knicks fans, and I think it's like New York-based teams as well. Unless you're like a Mets fan, they just seem like they are in the bottom of the barrel every day of the week. But Knicks fans are still, you know, I think his big line that we got from him was Knicks selling out the arena. And I was like, yeah, well, that's great, man. A full arena watching 17 wins. That couldn't be happier for you. You know, it's just a weird. They find the way, man. So they'll find a way to be bullish about this throughout the year. They'll get excited about, you know, Julius Randle. I almost said Ruben Randle, ex-Giant. But, you know, they'll find a way to be excited about it. And I don't know. Listen, I mean, accept that that's the process for you guys. I wish that Knicks fans would just kind of take that approach to it. Because unlike the Mets Yankees kind of thing, I don't take any sense of, I'm not happy that the Knicks are an awful team. I'm happy that the Nets were in a better position to sign these free agents and that they didn't give the Knicks a second thought. But, you know, I wish that they could be happier. I wish they could be excited about their team. And unfortunately, dejected Andy, he's not even necessarily sure about bringing in RJ in the draft. So there's even some concerns there from a reasonable Knicks fan of, hey, you drafted this guy, but you were outside of getting Zion, so you don't even know if the young players that you have are players that you're going to have there in another 2-3 years. So, if I want to be bullish as a Nets fan, I'm going to let you know, Knicks fans as well, you may be a lot further off than you realize.
Look, I'm an agnostic. I'm starting to root for the Nets, but it's only just I want the podcast to do well. So whatever the reason is,
Shameful.
That's okay. It's okay to say that. If we lose a few listeners for that, everyone has reasons they want their thing to go well. It would only help me to have the Nets be good. We took a risk by didn't much of a risk, but we started this podcast a few months ago because we kind of agreed that if there was a time to do it with the Nets, we could be out ahead of a little bit of some major moves this summer, and we were correct. And I feel good about that. And so I want the Nets to be good because it's more fun to podcast about a good team than it is a bad team. So I'm with you. I just more thought it's funny. I've been living in the NBA DFS world for so long that typically removes the fan base to a decent amount. So I haven't really engaged with fan bases in a long time.
Right.
It's been an interesting return to see how I'm like, oh, this is how that half lives, and I kind of like it. I enjoy getting on there and breaking down all the minutia of the stuff, and that's why we're going to be talking all season long about the Nets. What a day, buddy! Sunday in the books. Really could not have gone any better. The Sean Marks, Kenny Atkinson kind of duo has put together something. 3 years ago, this seemed unthinkable 3 years ago, I would say, and now it's sitting with probably the best Monday after reaction of free agency day you could really have expected as a Nets fan and really just as the Nets franchise as a whole. So it's going to be an exciting stuff to talk about all season long. We might come back and do a podcast later in this week. For sure, we'll be doing them once a week minimum for the rest of the summer as we get some summer league stuff, as we see the rest of the roster and the rest of the East and whatnot shakes out. If you want to support the podcast, and we hope you do, the best ways you can do that are to go over to iTunes, go over to Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the podcast, rate and review it. 5 stars or don't bother. Yep, you know the line. 5 stars or don't bother. And that is just the best way to help keep us around. We're not at a point where we're doing advertising or anything like that right now. But the best way that you can help us is just to go over, rate and review the podcast. Leave us a nice word. Recommend it to, if you have other Nets fans in your life, recommend it to them as well, and make sure that everyone's just downloaded. Don't listen together. That'd be a disaster. Don't get together and listen. You each need to download it.
These aren't listening parties.
No, we're not doing listening parties. Everyone goes onto their own device. Everyone goes on their own device and listens separately with your earphones on if you're doing listening parties. So make sure you're doing that. We really appreciate it. Buddy, one to just being the most excited you've ever been about the Nets fan. Where do you stand here before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, listen, on the scale of 1 to 10, I'm an 11, of course. It's just more exciting times to be a Nets fan. To go with the running gag, there's not enough towels in the world to dry me off. I'm drenched in the excitement of it all. But I also, in the excitement of this, I do want to just take a beat to say part of the process of bringing in Kyrie and KD and DeAndre Jordan obviously also meant that we were going to be moving on from D'Angelo Russell. And news came out on Sunday that all indications are there's going to be a sign and trade, which actually lands him out in Golden State with the Warriors. So you had mentioned this as it being maybe a nice gesture on a part of the Nets to make sure that D'Angelo ended up in a good landing spot in a place that obviously has had tremendous recent success, and with a move like this is probably looking to maintain that success. So but this is a part of the process. You're going to see some players that you're probably fond of moving on from your team when your organization is looking to take that next leap. And so we just kind of give a tip of the hat to D'Angelo Russell and really thank him, because his play last year on the court is what got us into the playoffs and really helped this organization turn that corner in terms of being an attractive destination in free agency for the likes of Kyrie and KD. So, nothing but continued success for him. I really hope that at just 23, he continues to play well and now gets to grow with that group of players out there in Golden State. And, just hopefully we don't see him on the court against us dropping any of those big games that he was given us last year. So
I'm just excited for Kyrie's first game where he comes with that third eye of the Raven plastered to his forehead. Comes out with that is on his
it's
uniform.
It's a fresh tattoo he's working on.
That'll be peak Kyrie, and that's all I kind of need from this podcast. All right, buddy, talk to you next time. WeGotNets.com is the site. We Got Nets over on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the places you listen to podcasts. Rate and review. Really appreciate it. Great day Sunday. Better things to come. Buddy, talk to you soon.
We're out.